True crimers, welcome to Break the Case. I'm your host. I'm Jen Coffindaffer. Hey, I'm so glad to have you guys here. I know it's a Friday and it's about 5 o'clock, but I thank you for taking time out of your schedules to be here. For those of you who have never been on the channel, we're a fact-based channel. We're not a drama channel. And we really go over facts and circumstances that exist and break it down from the law enforcement perspective. If you're always on this channel, thank you so much. You can't really know how much I appreciate it. And especially to all the members and, of course, to the mods. Appreciate you so much. A lot to discuss, so we're going to jump right in. We are going to be breaking down the simple question, and that is Sebastian Rogers' case cold like Summer Wells's case? But I want to start out with some positive news. The positive news I have, and I shared this a little bit at the end of our last live, is that certainly America's Most Wanted is going to be featuring Sebastian Rogers. And that's just amazing news, because whenever you're talking about a case going cold, you can feel it. You can feel it in mainstream media. It just kind of slithers away. All of a sudden, you never hear about the case. There's nothing being featured on the major networks. They're kind of the first to lose it. And then after that, the cable networks, and then, of course, social media, and it just trickles out. I was looking back on my social media, and the last time I really talked in terms of a lot of substance about Summer Wells was really a year ago. And I'm embarrassed to say that, because I guess that makes me part of the problem as well, is not using my platform to keep her name out there. But we're going to talk about whether this is cold, not from a media standpoint, but from a law enforcement standpoint. Although I will tell you, they very much go hand in hand. And that's why it's so important that all the channels, and it doesn't matter whether it's a channel that I may not agree with, a hate channel. It doesn't matter what channel it is. It can be small, it can be large. Just to have Sebastian Rogers' face and name is just so very critical. So I'm glad America's Most Wanted will be featuring him. We don't have the exact dates, but it looks like it's going to be either at the end of April or in May. I'm so psyched about this, because it's always important just for keeping this case in the national spotlight. So I appreciate that. All right, to really understand what it means to be a cold case, I mean, we have to understand that from a law enforcement perspective. What does it mean to say that a case is cold? And I'm going to continue to dabble in putting up some pictures. I'm going to try to put in a couple of videos, actually, that I specifically went and grabbed. So I think particularly two of these videos I want to try to show. But nevertheless, what makes law enforcement say a case is cold? It's actually quite elementary. It really comes down to, are there any unfollowed leads? Number one. In other words, is there anything lurking in that case you haven't done? Are there any interviews? Is there any videos that you haven't reviewed? You want to look at that, number one. Is there anything along those lines that you haven't followed up as a law enforcement officer? Number two, is there any tips coming in? Are you still receiving messages? Obviously, when somebody first goes missing, the phone is ringing off the hook. It's you can barely manage everything coming in. You're drinking from a water hose. You're triaging what's legitimate, what isn't legitimate, what needs to be looked at in terms of priority. And hopefully you follow up on everything. But again, it's our tips coming in. And at the point at which all leads are completely exhausted, and at the point at which no tips are coming in, basically the point as an investigator, you have this file sitting on your desk and you've exhausted at least what's in your mind that you can do to solve this case. And sometimes, unfortunately, that can mean where you believe you know what happened in the case. That can happen. You think you know exactly what happens, but you don't believe you have the evidence and the facts to support beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, as an investigator, you're really looking for probable cause. And I say that because the only requirement for search warrants and arrest warrants is probable cause. It is not a beyond reasonable doubt expectation or requirement. But the reality is, you are constantly in your cases, you are constantly dealing with the prosecutors. And a good agent and officer will literally be dealing with that prosecutor, not only on the case at hand, but even when you don't have a case, you're going in there, you're just glad handshaking. You're, hopefully you have a great relationship where you want to be in there, and you get together outside of work, inside of work. Whenever you're in that area, you want to stop in and just say, hey, I want to talk to Mr. Worley. And oftentimes agents, I know for about probably 3 years, I had my own office at the U.S. Attorney's Office, which was great. So you want to have this great relationship so you can discuss these cases honestly. And, you can just say to them, what are we missing? What else can I do to get this down the road for you to take it to the next step? So, but at the point a prosecutor says, this isn't going anywhere in my office, I can't in good conscience take this and charge because I don't think we have all the puzzle pieces put together to make this case stick in a court of law. And I don't want to ruin the case so that because of double jeopardy. So it becomes stuck. It's at a standstill, and then it's moved to another shelf. It's removed out of active to cold or pending. So there are many law enforcement agencies that actually have cold case squads. And those are, of course, the bigger departments. And they are literally going to have officers that dust off those cases, put it back on their desk, and take a fresh look at the case. Kimberly Moreau, I want to bring that case up. I got involved in that case when I was asked by somebody on my Twitter space. They just said, will you just look at this case? And it was great because I developed a relationship with the parents. They were on my show. I should say one parent, the mother is deceased, but the sisters were on my show as well. And I keep in contact with them whenever they meet with the FBI, because now they've reopened the case and they're actively trying to revisit it. So it's not always that a cold case will stay cold. Sometimes it'll get dusted off and will be actively worked by cold case or by other detectives. So, but I just wanted to explain, not that it's that complicated, what it means to have a case be cold, because without sort of that definition and understanding, how can we even determine whether Summer's case is cold or whether Sebastian's case is cold? All right, so from here, I want to focus on Summer for a minute, because this case is not only cold, it is ice cold, and it's been ice cold for years. Actually went back and I was looking, certainly in 2023, it was ice cold. I saw an interview by one of the detective sheriff's officers working on the case that basically he said, listen, unless a tip comes in, I don't do anything on the Summer Wells case. So I knew clear back, 2 years ago that it was cold. And We know it because we see signs, right? We see nothing being done on the ground. We see no interaction with the media. We see no requests by law enforcement. Hey, there's a black car. Can you take a look at it? In Brian Koberger's case, weeks in, hey, we have a white car. Help us, public, help us. You'll see that happen often. It's something that you can see to some degree where a case is going, or if it's going cold, or if it's still actively being worked. I want to talk specifically about the Summer Wells case, and I want to say why, in my opinion, it never had a chance. Sheriff Lawson, Ronnie Lawson, he was the sheriff in charge of that county. His son, and when I learned this, and I think I wrote the date down, October 17th, 2022. October 17th, 2022, I learned that Brendan, his son, had been convicted of 4 counts of aggravated sexual assault. A lot of details weren't released, but to my understanding, this involved someone that, I better be careful what I say. It was aggravated. There were factors that aggravate sexual assault, such as underage can aggravate a sexual assault crime. And he was sentenced to 20 years. Now, that is pretty reasonable. That's pretty reasonable. 4 counts, aggravated sexual assault, 20 years. Guess what he got? 1 year in jail. 1 year in jail. Basically a misdemeanor. Anything over a year in jail is considered a felony. Anything under a year in incarceration is considered a misdemeanor. Those are the definition in terms of how they are different. He got 1 year in jail. It was at this point was the first time I knew Summer didn't have a chance, because that department and that philosophy, it became very clear to me that Summer Wells wasn't important. What happened to Summer Wells wasn't important. Everything that had probably been going on with Summer Wells wasn't important. Remember, Don Wells himself said he slept with her. Now, I'm not saying had sex with her. I'm not saying that he said he had sex with her. I'm saying that they slept together in the same bed. And we know that Don Wells had a horrific background of sexual assault with young girls. We know he tried to sell his 2 children for drugs. This isn't anything that's rumored. This is nothing that I'm throwing against the wall. This is admitted to by multiple people on record as to his treatment of young girls. We know that the treatment in this house of children was so bad that Children's Services took the 3 boys out. Like, they're like, we're out, and have never been returned. For anybody who has dealt with child services, it takes a lot to have that happen. I mean, look at Harmony Montgomery, returned to Adam Montgomery, a drug dealer, ne'er-do-well, living in a car, rap sheet a mile long. Just, it takes a lot for family services to take children away. They took all three away. That should tell you a little bit of something about their living situation. Furthermore, just look at their living situation. It was delved into on YouTube. Chris McDonough went through that house. I mean, just look at that situation. Cats, dogs, filth. Not a pretty situation. Now, I've seen a lot of houses worse, believe it or not, with children living in them. And again, the parents maintain custody of their children. So I'm not saying that it's completely unique to see that situation. But it's, definitely they were in a neglectful, if not abusive situation. So we know that. But back to why, again, we know her case is cold. First of all, early on, it was worked really hot and heavy by police to a degree. I mean, it was clear to me they didn't treat this case as a possible homicide. They truly treated it as a missing child. I've always called this case the John Bonet of Tennessee, the poor version of John Bonet Ramsey case, where it just wasn't handled right from the very beginning. And that led to issues certainly now in determining what in the world happened to Summer Wells. For anybody who saw the initial public interview of Dawn Wells and Candace Wells, many of the YouTube, all of that media is gone, a lot of it. I was looking for it today and it just says no longer available because Candace Wells and Dawn Wells really just buried themselves in these drug-laden diatribes about the case and different activities they were involved in. I mean, it was just disgusting to listen, and the issues of truth-telling were so obvious, the changes in story. So to me, and likely to law enforcement, I think they probably realized in short order that Dawn, Candace, Grandis, which was the mother of Candace, likely at least knew what happened, if not more. Remember, Dawn Wells specifically said, quote, "I went downstairs," and you can find this, "I went downstairs and she was gone and the door was unlocked." Well, remember, if you remember early on interviews, he wasn't there. He was at work, the whole "I'm at work" excuse. And there's a picture that you can see a reflection and see Dawn's truck. So you can see he was there. Again, he said he was there. And there was a couch in front of this door at one point, and the door was always kept locked. That's what they said until they didn't say that. There were so many inconsistencies in this case. You could drive a truck through the inconsistencies that were presented. Grandis, same thing. Oh, I went, let's see, she planted cactus and then she took a nap. And then she said she wasn't sure, but she thought she was at the horse pond, that's where they took Summer to. Obviously, there's a witness, an independent third-party witness. We know they were at that horse pond, but basically, Grandis, who couldn't even make an interview and look the person she was talking to in the eye. You don't have to look at the camera. They're usually off to the side, but typically you look people in the eye when you're giving answers, when you're telling the truth. Just typically, I'm not saying everybody, but that is something we look for. In other words, I just believe that because that case became sort of unsolvable because of early on evidence collection, because lack of really any evidence that there's no body, there was no particular evidence. It was really a case that I thought her brothers were going to solve. I remember first being interviewed about this case, and I told Marnie Hughes, I think it was Marnie that interviewed me. I said, if it gets solved, it will be because one of those boys talks and says what happened. That hasn't happened, apparently. And if it has, law enforcement seemingly isn't able to corroborate anything. When Don Wells was arrested for a DUI, basically, it was, I think they put him in jail for about 8 months, something like that. I thought that might be a huge break in the case because they would be separated. Candace no longer would have Don, and that one would turn on the other. It didn't happen. There were a lot of other crazy things that happened. I want to show you, if I can get this to come up, this particular video, and you all can make out of it what you will. I'll never forget the first time I saw it. I do want to sidetrack and thank Panda Bear's mom for becoming a member. It means so much when you guys join. I think it's all of $1 a month, but I do really appreciate it. Jax Wolf, thank you so much. Oh, trigger warning. Good idea. This isn't that bad. This was something to me that I just found more alarming than a trigger warning needed. Were you guys able to see that video that I showed? No. Okay, I apologize. Basically, this was a video that was constructed by Candace Wells. And what the video said or showed was basically what I took as Candace Wells burning up in hell. There were flames all over her, and it was her just really burning in hell, sort of in this very bizarre and gross way. That's how I took it. I will post it on my Twitter so you all can see it. I apologize. I am not exactly sure when I can't download my video like I downloaded these pictures for you all to see. I was able to actually last week do it successfully, but I wasn't able to copy. And so I apologize that I can't show that. But again, just another sign of Candace and her mindset toward this little girl. Let's see. Wanted to quickly just say, in a nutshell, unless there is some huge breakthrough, either by the parents, one turning against the other, or by the brothers saying something that law enforcement can corroborate, this case is absolutely as cold as ice. But does Sebastian's case really mimic that? As most of you know, Sebastian went missing on February 25th. And he went missing. The last person to see him was his mother, Katie Proudfoot. Her statement is that he went to sleep at night. She heard a thud after 10 o'clock at night, and she didn't go in and check on him. The next morning at 6, when she went to wake him, he was gone. That's Mama's version of what happened. She panicked. She looked around the house. Chris Proudfoot, who was the stepfather, was not in the area. Seth Rogers, who was the father, was not in the area. He was working. And so what we have really to rely on is Katie Proudfoot's version of events. The last time there's a true proof of life was on the 25th in the evening at the Texas Roadhouse, where they ate. And thank you all. I really appreciate y'all becoming members. As I said, it really means a lot. So what makes any of us think the possibility that this could be cold? I want to tell you why. At least what we need to look at. First of all, the FBI coming in and saying, giving a $50,000 reward. Whenever you have that happen, whenever we had cases and they were going cold, you wanted to get reward money because you hoped that anybody who might know anything about your case, you hoped that they would be able to see this carrot, this $50,000 carrot in this case, and come forward and say, even anonymously, you can pay out sometimes anonymously. You could certainly pay out. You could certainly have people come forward and treat them, at least in the FBI, as informants and keep their information quiet. We pay informants all the time that we don't publicly display who they are. Certainly the FBI knows, but nobody else would ever know. So there's all sorts of carrots you can dangle in a case like this to say, please, if anybody has information, you're going to get 50,000 if it leads to finding him. So that's a big concern when I first saw that, because again, when you have leads coming in and you're constantly investigating, you don't need to offer $50,000 for leads. Why? Because they are right there. You don't need $50,000 to get people to give you information. So when I first saw that, obviously it gave me great pause, and it made me wonder if they're running out of leads, if they're running out of possibilities as to what they believe happened to Sebastian Rogers. It made me also wonder if they know or believe they know what happened to Sebastian Rogers. But that second case I told you about, or the second instance that you have to consider, and that is, you may think you know who's responsible. You may even have circumstantial evidence that somebody's responsible, but is it strong enough? Is it strong enough for a prosecutor to take your case? And I also want to really quickly say, circumstantial evidence sometimes is much stronger than direct evidence. In other words, an eyewitness. Eyewitnesses are notoriously wrong. They get confused. They remember small amounts of detail, but sometimes not enough, in my opinion, to make an exact identification of a person. So while they typically can provide a lot of details, they can't say in a lineup that that's the person unequivocally, and that is direct evidence. But circumstantial cases are so very strong because it's like weaving together all the clues that lead to the answer of who committed a crime. I'll give you an example of what circumstantial evidence is. If you go to sleep and you look outside and your grass is green, and you go to bed and you wake up the next morning and you look outside and your grass is covered in beautiful white snow, you didn't directly see that snow come down, but you can say 1,000% with no doubt in your mind that it snowed. That's how strong circumstantial evidence can be. So is law enforcement at a stage right now where they don't have enough strong circumstantial evidence to bring that case? Is that the case? Do they know who's responsible or believe they know, and they're still trying to weave it together? I've always said, and I actually did a whole live on this, that there's only a couple of possibilities. There's three. I always say, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to be in law enforcement. You take common sense and hard work and, hone your skills, and you can put great cases together. There's only three possibilities. You ready? We've talked about it. Number one, Sebastian Rogers got out of bed in the middle of the night, in the wee hours of the night, after midnight, that's according to Katie, opened up the front door, according to Chris, with no shoes on, according to Katie and Chris, and walked out of that house barefoot with nothing but a flashlight keychain fob and sweatpants and a sweatshirt. Now, many have said it wasn't cold that night. Well, it's just baloney. It was cold that night, not when they left the not when they left, the Texas Roadhouse. I think it was about in the 50s. You can look at this chart. It was certainly cold out. It would have been in the 30s at that hour in the morning. I mean, we can look exactly on this chart. 30 in the 30s. So now you're in the 30s. You are barefoot. It's what was said, not socks, barefoot. I'm going to explain in a minute, and I know I've touched on it before. Perhaps if something nefarious happened, why you would say that. And you're going to walk out in the middle of the night. If we are to believe this scenario, then this means he is somewhere in those woods that have been searched, and he left walking barefoot and didn't leave a scent trail for the dogs to follow. We've gone over the dog so many times. In a nutshell, there is not one dog that hit on Sebastian Rogers' scent. Yes, there was human scent that was followed to the retention pond that was drained. Yes, we know, over to the construction site. Not Sebastian Rogers. That's a pretty critical piece of information there. So I for one, I give that about 1%. 1% that he was able to leave. Remember, there is a lot of video surveillance coverage. According to some people, over 100 hours worth. Law enforcement has it all. And what has law enforcement said? Now that they got the date right, from the 25th to the 20, that he last seen on the 25th, reported on the 26th, he hasn't been seen. Not seen since the 25th, since Katie Proudfoot saw him. So how did he just put on his, Hogwarts magic cloak and walk out unseen? Didn't leave any scent from those little feet behind? And somehow was able, in 30-degree weather, had the wherewithal to hide himself somewhere in the woods that nobody could find? I'm going with less than 1%. I always have to give something a possibility because I've seen some strange things, but less than 1% chance that occurred. Way less. I mean, it's not even a probability. It's a possibility, and it's on the lowest spectrum. Second option, he was met by somebody, perhaps online. We know, there's a recent photograph circulating that he is on a computer, yet he supposedly didn't have computer access. But remember, he did have computer access. We know he did. It was whether he had internet access. Who could he have communicated with at school? Remember, I've always found it odd that they took the computer that was dusty, that they didn't have the cord for, that Seth Rogers had said he hadn't used forever, but they left behind the computer that he actually did use. I've never understood that. And I hope law enforcement somehow got a hold of that. According to Seth, they haven't. I don't understand that. And that has me very confused. But nevertheless, that he was somehow contacted, and that in that light video that we see, there's two separate light sources. No, they aren't headlights. They are very small, and they don't move in tandem. They move independently, and they move from Seth Rogers' house. And it's the light video, in my opinion, is indisputable evidence that at some point there were people, at least two people out there with lights. I say at least two people because it was so dark, but we could see two light sources connected to two people. Were other people out there? They could be, because it's so dark you can't make anything out except for these two little lights. I'm talking about Nick Beres's footage. So could Sebastian Rogers have gone out undetected, unheard, without the dogs barking, decided not to put his shoes on, didn't bring his favorite switch, didn't bring his cell phone, did have his glasses, and walked out there to meet somebody. Could that have happened? We have to give that a possibility. And then the issue I have with that is we see one of the light sources leave, and we see the other house go back in the direction of the Proudfoot home. Okay? Nevertheless, we have to consider that a third party was involved in kidnapping, taking, maybe voluntarily at first, Sebastian Rogers. If we are to believe that, where was the vehicle that entered? If we are to believe that, did they just walk across the neighborhood unseen? Does law enforcement have video footage that is important? We know that the video footage of the person that appeared after the dog walker, that a certain person decided to go media crazy sensational and release that and say how important it was, this huge break in the case, only to have law enforcement come out, and they haven't made many statements, but they went on record and said, absolutely, that's not a break in the case. We've known about that forever, and it's inconsequential. It is not something that is relevant to what happened to Sebastian Rogers. To me, they've obviously identified who that person was and why they were there, and it did not intersect with what happened to Sebastian Rogers. And so I just want to dispel that, because I don't think, I'm not sure if I've given a live since that happened, because that all happened around the, I'm not calling it an anniversary, the time, the 25th of this year and the 26th, when a lot of people went to the media. You know, I was on with Seth, of course. It was a very tough time for him. I went on his show to talk about the case. I don't think I actually did my own live, though. So in any event, I wanted to bring up and touch on that, because believe it or not, I couldn't believe it when I'm still seeing NBC National carry that story. I couldn't believe it when I saw the local NBC channel carrying that story of having weight. Imagine how many people are so confused thinking, oh, that was Sebastian Rogers. He has been seen and he walked out that day. See, that's what this guy says. It is, they should retract it. After, at the very end of the news story, if you guys go look right now and look at the very, I think it's the last or second to last paragraph, they say, oh, by the way, the sheriff's office, Craddock, said it has nothing to do with the case and it's not a lead. They buried it. They buried the truth and went with the sensational headline that there was, basically how I interpreted it, that Sebastian walked out and that could be Sebastian. It's just so wrong when I see sometimes these games and shenanigans played. But nevertheless, I want to make sure this channel keeps with facts, and that's the fact. Go to the bottom of what happened and how that is completely blown out of the water, that ridiculous theory, if we're to believe law enforcement. All right, number 3 is that something happened inside that house, either happened accidentally or happened not accidentally, and that Sebastian Rogers in that light video was somehow removed from the house. Okay, we've talked about this before. Those are the only 3 possibilities, because I don't believe aliens took him. I don't believe that that some entity snapped their fingers like Bewitched and made him disappear. I'm giving you my age right now because I love to watch that show Bewitched. But nevertheless, very small possibility, much stronger possibility. That's all we have right here. That's what law enforcement has to go with. I want to talk about why why that scenario 3 is a possibility, a stronger possibility. First of all, just like in the Summer Wells case, we know of the abuses. You know, he was abused, period, end of story. We know it. He's walking around in diapers. Yes, I say that because that could be important. I've always pointed out you need to know exactly what they would have had on, because if somebody could have found a diaper, because if it were wet, you would not keep it on, you would discard it. That is something, and then plus just a 15-year-old walking around at his stature, you would possibly be able to notice something like that. So it is important, and it is abuse, in my opinion. And the other instances of abuse, which I believe are abuse because he is on the spectrum, I do not believe you can hit him with a belt. There are 2 instances. Go back and look for anybody who wants to argue that point. It wasn't 1 time, it was 2 times, and it's admitted to. Okay? No scent dog. The Cajun Navy reported it had become a criminal violation. Uvalde said it became a criminal violation. They searched a landfill, and the FBI does not get involved in offering up rewards in missing cases unless they believe there is criminal activity afoot. In April of 2024, that's the last time we have heard law enforcement have a big presser, come out and meet, interview with Barris or interview with anybody in a larger format. And they said at that time, listen, we don't have any information that this was foul play. And we don't have any information it wasn't. The book's open. And I just recently saw another, not a statement he made, but a written statement in one of those articles where he reiterates that. So basically, law enforcement is doing what law enforcement should be doing. They are staying on the fence about that. Now, back to the original question. Is this a cold case? Thank you, Truth and Time. I want to point this out. Okay. What are the priorities of the TBI? Remember, even though the sheriff's office has maintained their primary jurisdiction in this case, which is not unusual, the locals, just like in Moscow, Idaho, they do not want to give up the jurisdiction. Really, it is their venue, it's their jurisdiction, it's their community that's affected. I get it. And there's no way the sheriff's office wants to give that up. But the TBI has been assisting, and obviously the FBI has been assisting. Look at this priority list. I hope you can see it clear enough. Now, what does this mean, Jen? It's just a priority list. TBI. I want you to show me where missing is on there. If you can't read it, it says their key priorities are human trafficking, cybercrime, drug trends, opioids, identity theft, crime statistics. I'm serious. Officer-involved shootings, hemp and marijuana, patient abuse, sex assault, and kits. What else? I'm sorry, it's so teeny. Medical fraud and drug endangered kids. Why is this even important? It's important because, and I can only speak to the FBI for sure, but when the FBI sets out the priorities, they send them out to all the agents. It's a big deal. Here are the priorities, and it probably is very similar to when I retired. The number 1 priority is terrorism, international terrorism. They do not want a 9/11. And so they put huge amounts of resources, meaning people and money and everything they have, they are going to throw at terrorism. I'm sure human trafficking is up there. Domestic terrorism is up there. And all this means is these are your priorities. It is not they're missing kids. There are more missing kids in Tennessee than you can shake a stick at, because I've been looking at them all day. So don't think that missing kids are a priority for the TBI because they aren't. And you can see that. I'm not finding fault with them about it. I'm not saying, man, that's messed up. I'm just stating a fact. This is not where their resources and their time is going. In other words, I am quite sure, because their number one priority is human trafficking, I am quite sure that they have a human trafficking squad where they investigate a lot of different human trafficking issues, okay? So to think that they are missing squad or the people that handle their missing people numbers highly, no, it's not, because they have said this is what's important and this is what we're going to give our resources to. Number two, I want you to take a close look at this because this blew my socks off. I went into TBI's website because I wanted to know if, and I'm going to get to your question, and I can't thank you enough. That's such a large donation to the channel. Thank you so much. Cognizance and Crime. Look at this. You see here, this is Tennessee's missing, and I looked under active, okay? Active investigations, and there's a bunch of them. And guess who's not on there? Summer Wells isn't on there. And you know who else isn't on there? You are exactly right. Sebastian Rogers is not on TBI's missing person active cases. So our original question when we began the show, is his case cold? Is TBI actively working it? TBI answered the question. TBI isn't. Either that or they've made another administrative error. I don't know, but I don't think they are. I think they've run out of leads. I think if they know who did it, they don't have enough to prove it and bring it to court, at least at this time. And so they're just waiting for some miracle, just like they did in Summer Wells, for some big break to happen. But it's not on their active. You can go look on the website. Is Sumner County, is it active in Sumner County? I certainly think it's open. I think it's as active as it can be. I don't think they've shelved it. I think they're working it. I think they care. I think they want to find Sebastian. I think they want to find out what happened to Sebastian. I think they want to make a case. But as time ticks by, it goes from hot to warm to lukewarm to cold. Right now we're lukewarm. That's my assessment from what I know. I haven't talked to Sumner County. Typically never reach out to people that are actively involved in an investigation. It puts them in a very difficult situation, typically. So I just want to say, from what I can see and from my experience knowing about how cases work, we're at lukewarm, and I'm sure they're either A, trying to put the final pieces of the puzzle together to prove what they think happened to Sebastian, or B, and I hope this isn't it, they have no idea and they're hoping for a windfall. Wanted to say one other thing really quick in this vein about the America's Most Wanted. Is everybody here familiar with the Karen Reed case? You may not be. It's a terrible case. I would stay out of it unless you really just want to find yourself in quite a pigsty, because that case is probably the only case. I mean, you guys think it's bad here, you know, the different channels that go after each other and the distractions and all the hot mess on this case. This is nothing compared to the other case. But the reason I bring it up some of the strongest evidence, and that trial starts on the 1st, that I believe the Commonwealth, they call it Commonwealth there. There's only a few Commonwealths in the United States, but Massachusetts is one of them. One of the strongest pieces of evidence, not one piece, it's many pieces, is the subject of that case, Karen Reed, who's accused of murdering her boyfriend, who was a Boston police officer, is she has waived her right, her attorney-client privilege rights, and she's made all this film. She was recently in Investigation ID, Discovery ID, actually. They did a tremendous job telling the story. If you do want to get caught up on that case, it's two-sided. It's definitely her side of things, and in fact, it's about 80% focuses on her and her attorneys and what they have to say, and maybe 20%, 30% on the other side. But they are going to be able to use all the conflicting statements, all the things she said that just painted a complete picture of being guilty by going forward in this way. Now, why I wanted to bring this up is I find it very interesting that America's Most Wanted is now going to have raw footage of Katie Proudfoot, Chris Proudfoot, of course, of Seth Rogers as well. They are going to have raw footage. Ooh, love that. I want to see, are there conflicting statements? Are they going to be able to get any help for their point? Are there going to be any slips? And I really wanted to show this one piece of film that I have. It's on YouTube. Please look at Katie Proudfoot's interview on about the 25th. It might have been the 26th, but it was when she was interviewed, and she was by herself, and they asked about his birthday. I really wanted to show it up here, and I know I haven't talked about it before, but she literally says he would have been 16. She doesn't quite get it all out because she catches herself. She says, and Sebastian would have been, is 16. Please look at that video. It's really important, at least for me as an investigator. It's a big, it's a clue. It's a clue. It's a clue. All right, let me read this really quick. And thanks again, Jen. I would like to ask why law enforcement or the FBI has not tried to put out progressive photos of Sebastian like they have another case. Progress him with no glasses, longer hair. They did this for Harley Morris after 6 months. What a great question. I'm so glad that you brought this up. So true. And it needs to be done. Because as you all know who have kids this age, between about the age of, I don't know, once they start hitting puberty, and we know that from Seth has talked about that, they just really changed. Their voice drops. We know his voice had dropped. Sebastian's voice had dropped. We know, you're starting to get facial hair. You just are morphing, and at that really super awkward stage, I would call it, of a teen boy, 15, 16, 17, and then they start becoming more of a man and kind of get out of that awkward stage. So it's such a great question, and I don't know, but that's something that hopefully will be poised to law enforcement. I will do my part in that to see what I can do. But it's a great question because we have to keep hope. We have to maintain hope that he is alive, that maybe he was taken by a third party, that maybe he was taken by another individual that meant him no harm and that he's alive. It's a lot to believe. Since nobody has seen him for a year, he hasn't been on any video. He's just disappeared. But I've talked about Connor's Jack Oswalt before, and there are other instances, not going this long a period of time, where people on the spectrum have walked away. They have not been found in water, and they've been found alive. And I agree. Let's keep that hope. I'm keeping that hope. I want to see what this says. Facts. Katie Proudfoot was the last person with Sebastian. Absolutely. And of course, law enforcement, that's something they look at closely. I mean, that's the first thing you look at. You want a interview. You want to have them do their polygraph. They have to retrace their steps. They've been in that house a lot. I never understood why they didn't do any sort of luminol testing. We know they didn't because Chris Proudfoot told us that. Chris Proudfoot knows so much for never having been there, but he has most of the answers. Katie has a few of the answers. So we're going to see. We're going to see what happens. But the bottom line is, I hope everybody keeps the faith. I hope everybody keeps showing his face, keeps saying his name, because it is really, truly so important if there are ever going to be answers as to what happened to Sebastian Rogers. And let's hope that this is still lukewarm, still being actively worked. In other words, what that means is if I'm an agent and I have an active case, what that means is that file is on my desk, and every day or at least every week on that file, because you have so many cases, I am pushing that case forward. I'm doing an interview. I'm doing a surveillance. I'm looking at surveillance tape. I am doing something to move that case forward. That's active. It's very simple. If nobody is doing anything to push his case forward, that's cold. I don't think we're cold yet. I don't think we're cold. So, in fact, I had every faith that something was going to come very soon. And I'm keeping that faith. I'm keeping that faith. Let's see. Can you explain what a judicial warrant is? Could it help this case? A judicial warrant. I'm not sure what that term means. I've never used it or seen it in a case that I've ever worked. So I'm unfamiliar with the term judicial warrant. There are all sorts of warrants that can be issued. And again, warrants are where you establish probable cause. You go to a judge. That judge gives you the authority to get information pursuant to that warrant. Judicial warrant, again, I think that might be what you're talking about. Judicial certainly means signed by a judge, and a warrant would have to be signed by a judge to seek information. So if there's no other questions, I want to let you all get on with your evening. I can't thank you enough again for being here and for being here for Sebastian. I really hoped we'd have big movement, but we're not cold. We're not cold yet. All right, everybody. Until next time, may justice be served.